your brain, it's not as fixed as you think. For most of your life, it's sort of run through these familiar patterns, thoughts, fears, reactions, same stories about who you are. And then psilocybin comes into this, and for a few hours, it seems like it's loosening up that grip on those patterns, and suddenly parts of the brain that normally aren't communicating, they start talking to each other. And when that happens, the old mental loops, they soften up. Your emotions, they come forward. Memories might feel different. And some people walk away saying, I saw my life completely through a new perspective. So the question is, what's really happening in the brain? Hi, I'm Zappy Zappling, co-founder of Psychedelic Concierge. I've been exploring psychedelics, healing, and the rapidly evolving science behind these extraordinary medicines. If you're looking to better understand psychedelics and how to navigate this space safely and responsibly, we put together a free guide briefing, the link's below. Now, before we begin this video, I want to point out that this is for educational purposes only. It's not medical or legal advice, and psychedelics are not right for everybody. So consult a qualified professional and follow the laws where you live. Now, let's look at what actually happens when psilocybin's doing its thing inside the brain. A lot of people talk about mushrooms like they're magic, and I understand that because the experience, it can feel mystical, emotional, spiritual, and sometimes even life-changing. But what I love about this moment in history is that we're finally beginning to understand that the science behind these ancient cultures and what they've known for a long time, while it might not be perfect or complete, but it's enough to see that something real is happening. So when you understand what psilocybin may be doing in the brain, you start to understand why people report breakthroughs around depression, addiction, grief, trauma, even their creativity going up or spirituality coming to them. But you also understand through that process that preparation, setting, support, integration, why they're so important. Because psilocybin doesn't just affect the brain, it actually opens up a window. And what happens inside that window depends a lot on the container around it. So first off, let's keep this simple. When somebody consumes psilocybin mushrooms, the body converts the psilocybin into psilocin. And psilocin is actually the active compound that interacts with the brain. And one of the places that it interacts with is the serotonin receptors, especially the receptor that's in there. It's called the 5-HT2A receptor. Now, I don't want to turn this into a chemistry lecture because I'm not qualified to do that, but the simple version is that the serotonin is involved in mood, perception, emotion, and even meaning. So when that psilocybin interacts with these systems, it can change the way that the brain processes reality for a period of time. So in that state, the colors might seem brighter, the music sounds more emotional, memories may feel even closer, and your body may start to feel more alive. The ordinary boundaries between your thoughts and your emotions and even your identity, they start to soften up a little bit. And it's not just that somebody is seeing something, it's that the brain is processing this information in a very different way. One of the things that I love about this field is that we're still discovering new things. And for years, most of the conversation about psilocybin has been how it affects the brain through this 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. But the researchers are now exploring another receptor, and it's called your 5-HT2B receptor, which is found in a place like the liver. And in one of the recent studies, a researcher gave the microdoses of psilocybin over 12 weeks, and they saw this remarkable improvement in liver health, in all the metabolic markers. And it was one of those moments that made a lot of people in the field say, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? Because they knew about the brain, but they didn't know about the liver. And it reminds us that we're at the beginning of understanding these compounds. Now that I've said that, I want to say that when people think about psilocybin, they're thinking about what's happening in the brain primarily. And that's one of the most fascinating discoveries to come out, is to realize that, hey, this is affecting your liver. This could literally be healing you on a physical level, not just a mental level. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. One of the most talked about parts of psychedelic science is something that's called the default mode network in your brain. And if you think about the default mode network as a part of the brain that's the storytelling system, it's involved in your self-reflection, your sense of identity, your personal narrative, and it's the voice that says, this is who I am, this is my life, this is what happened to me, and this is what I can do and what I can't do. That system is useful because you need a sense of self to function in the world, but sometimes that story becomes like a prison, where somebody says, I'm broken, I'm not lovable, I can't change, this trauma defines me, I'm an addict. They keep rehearsing these patterns over and over. And what psilocybin seems to be doing, at least temporarily, is it's quieting or loosening parts of that self-referential network. And when that happens, people may experience a little bit of space between themselves and that story that's been with them. They may have been living inside that story, and all of a sudden, somebody can immediately see, aha, wait a minute, I'm not my depression, I'm not my addiction, I'm not that thing that happened to me. That happened to me, but that's not me. I'm me. And that can be a very powerful moment. It can change somebody's life. Another really fascinating thing that appears to happen on psilocybin is that there's these different brain regions that start to communicate with each other in a new way that doesn't normally happen. And I like to think of it like a city where you've got the normal traffic flows, you got the highways, the intersections, you've got, all these different routes. And that makes things efficient, but it can also be limiting. And psilocybin seems to temporarily at least open up these side streets, these bridges, pathways that don't usually get used. And all of a sudden, parts of the brain that normally don't talk to each other, they start sharing information. And this is one of the reasons that people make these unusual connections that they never could have made before. They see an old memory in a new way. They might connect to a childhood experience and then see that through their present day behaviors. And they're going to understand these relationship patterns better than ever before. They start to feel compassion where there used to be angry, or beauty where something looked really ordinary. And the brain becomes less rigid. These patterns start to be softer and more flexible, more open. And that openness is part of what can make that experience feel so profound. A lot of people call that neural plasticity. I'd ask you, if you've had a psilocybin experience, did it feel like your brain was making new connections, or did it feel emotional or spiritual, physical, or something else entirely? I say this, leave me a comment below because I love reading these stories and I love hearing people describe these experiences. And if you enjoyed this video, this conversation, give it a like and subscribe. Now, one of the most exciting ideas around psilocybin is this neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity is basically the brain's ability to change, to adapt, to form these new connections. And that's important because a lot of human suffering is all about these patterns that we keep living, the anxiousness, the addiction, self-critical, a shutdown, whatever that is. These are repeating patterns, and the brain under psilocybin starts to get more flexible. For at least a period of time, it creates this window where new learning may actually be possible. But this is also where people misunderstand psychedelics, because the window, that's not the transformation. The window is the opportunity. If somebody has a psilocybin experience and they go right back to their old habits, same environment, same relationships, that old way of thinking, then those old patterns can't reset themselves. But if that window is paired with therapy, journaling, meditation, changes in behavior, something different can begin to take root. And this is where I always say that the medicine opens the door, but what you do afterwards is going to determine what your life turns into, what the actual changes are. Another thing that people often notice on psilocybin is that their emotions feel amplified. So sometimes beautifully, but sometimes uncomfortably. Love might feel enormous, or grief might come forward. Fear might arise, or even forgiveness might come up and a possibility might exist. From the outside, somebody might say, why is that person crying so much? But inside that experience, this person may be feeling like years of emotion are finally moving through them. The brain and body are no longer separate. And when old emotions materialize and come forward in a safe container, people feel like they're not frozen anymore. It's sort of thawing out. And if somebody's in a safe place and they've got a trained guide who's emotionally open, it can become very meaningful. But if they're in an unsafe place without preparation, that same emotion could feel overwhelming. The medicine is powerful, but the container is what's really going to determine how that power is experienced. Now, science can explain part of this, but not all of it. And I think we should be honest about that because brain scans can show the different areas where there's more connectivity. Researchers can talk about the receptors and the networks and that neuroplastic state. But when somebody says something like, I felt connected to God, or I forgave my father, or I realized that love is the foundation of everything. And we can talk about the brain, but we also have to honor the mystery. Because for thousands of years, human beings have been using these sacred plants and funguses, not just to treat symptoms, but for meaning, for connection, for healing, for remembering who they are. So yes, psilocybin does affect the brain, but for a lot of people, it also affects the way that they relate to life. And that may be the most important part of their entire psilocybin journey. If there's one thing that I want people to take away from this and remember, it's that psilocybin doesn't just make you hallucinate. It could temporarily even loosen up those brain patterns that you would call normal and quiet those typical stories about the self. And they can increase this communication between these different regions, and that's going to create a window where these insights and these changes actually become possible. But the medicine's not the whole story. The preparation matters, the setting, the support, integration that you have, that matters because your brain may be open during the experience, but your life changes by what you practice afterwards. If you found this video valuable, give it a like so that more people can find these grounded conversations, and subscribe for more videos on not just psychedelics, but the ethics, the facilitation, and personal growth. If you're feeling called right now to go deeper, click the link in the description, watch the free guide briefing, and it's going to help you to better understand the psychedelic space, the different pathways that are available, how you could get involved safely, ethically, and legally. So thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.